What do I like in a horror movie? I don't believe there's a specific formula. A lot of times there are components that kind of overlap and just are there from time to time. I'm going to try as hard as I can to not speak in nebulous terms. The first thing is usually a plot that I can get into. Most of the plots that I like tend to not really be that complicated, right? Like a lot of slashers are just, babysitters and some silent killer. Of course, there are variations of this idea, but you get the point that it's a plot that you really don't need to think that hard about. It's just a sequence of it's just something where events are happening and they're not in some convoluted way. Um, I guess the other part of it is interesting or likable characters. A lot of the final girls in, for example, the Friday the 13th series are not the most interesting that I've ever seen, but they get the job done in terms of like I'd rather see them survive than just get murdered for no reason. And that actually has been a criticism of a lot of different horror movies and the various franchises that they make characters that are purposefully not likable so that we can, I guess, be on the side of the killer, which, not every character has to be a nice person. Um, but you get the idea that when it's someone you like or at least otherwise have no reason to dislike, it can feel more investing to see something happen to them. Like you look at a lot of the kids from the original Scream. These are a pretty well fleshed out cast, and when the several of them that die, do end up biting the dust, I'm not happy or excited by any of it. It is what it is. Mm. When it comes to a villain or I guess an antagonist, performance wise, they just have to be intimidating to me. Like I would never say Michael or Jason are just so extremely interesting and whatever. Like I've always said, I like someone like Freddy or Chucky or even some of the different ghost faces. In terms of like being characters better than those two, and just due to them being talkative and like actually having motivations and just personalities. But even if they're not speaking, and this is true of Art the Clown from Terrifier as well, as long as I really do believe the protagonists are in danger from this person, I can become, invested and actually interested in the story as well. Now, of course, the caveat is that if I don't like the protagonist or don't find them interesting or even the story all that good, right, then it's going to be another issue. Like, and I even was thinking of doing a whole video about this one, but just for example, I really do not like Friday the 13th Part 8 for the false premise of, Jason going to New York and then only being in there for a portion of the movie. And I don't really think the protagonists are that interesting. So even though Jason himself is fine, right? He is regular old Jason, because the plot and the other characters are all kind of it doesn't really mesh well with me. And this is true of pretty much every other movie in that series after Part 7, except for maybe Freddy versus Jason. But that one's a distinct from the other ones because you have the added allure of it being this crossover film with Nightmare on Elm Street. When it comes to like actually being scary, I guess that's something where I also differ with other fans in that I there's a place for gore. Something like Saw. I know I watched one of those. Some of the stuff in there makes me cringe. Particularly that one scene in the third movie with the whole opening of the back of the head. I'm not gonna get. I'm not gonna try to spoil it, but if you've seen, you know what I'm talking about. And there's a lot of sequences in that particular series that have a lot of blood, have a lot of dismemberment, and just various other things that are off-putting to the eye that kind of make your stomach turn. But I can be afraid of things that are more psychological as well. Like one of the things I liked about Scream, just the series prior to the fifth movie, was always, who is Ghostface? And it could be anybody. And there's that whole paranoia of like, usually the killer is some distinct person that stands out. You see Jason, he stands out. You see Michael, he stands out. Same thing with Freddy, same thing with Chucky, Leatherface. We can go down the list, but with Ghostface, just that identity, it could be anyone, and that is part of what always made those first four Wes Craven films so distinct to me. That was like an allure of just what made me concerned. But I really don't need that much gore. Like I find the original Halloween scary for just the fact that you're in this suburbanized area with some stalker, and there is a level of realism in that film that the sequels don't have, well, until you get to the last sequence of it, which is entirely supernatural. But just the idea of like there's this man, he's got a mask on, and for no apparent reason, he's just killing these seemingly innocent teenagers, and he gets them alone, or maybe there's two of them together, but when they're separated, right, they lower their guards and he's able to sneak up on them. And that was something that is scary to me because it is a thing that could happen in real life. But then when you go to the other films, I'm also sometimes scared by just like the sheer power of the character. Like I'm scared for different reasons. Like Scream, the plot of it most of the time is something that could happen in real life, but it's also like people are usually not this advanced to even plot out stuff like that. It really just comes down to, each one of these different films I like tends to have, if it's something where I like it for more than just the story, but also how scary it is, it can be a mix of either what I'm seeing visually in terms of blood being what, intimidates and like makes me scared, or it can be the actual like just premise of the story. Because there are a lot of chase scenes that have made my heart race. Even if the killer is not necessarily fast enough to catch up to the person, just like how are they going to get away from this? Like the laundry chute scene in Halloween 5, for example. So there's a lot of things that go into making a horror movie that I like, and I guess the one thing I can say is I feel like I'm pretty versatile. Like not everything has to be the same. Not everything has to click off the same buttons, but there are core themes that most of the ones I enjoy tend to have, right? Some characters, protagonists I like, a villain who, if they don't have an engaging personality, they're at least by the classical definition scary, and a plot I can get into that isn't too complicated, not too convoluted. Something where I hear a premise. I'm like, okay, I can sit down and see what's going on. So it's, I've tried as hard as I can to answer the question and kind of just give some examples. But I'm always open to just trying something out, and then if I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. I didn't really expect to like Megan, but that film, for example, had a pretty interesting premise of this. In a way, it kind of reminded me of Child's Play a little bit, but it still had like a nice twist where it's the dynamic of the aunt and little girl, and just that thing of like this doll that advances and is originally got a pretty good intention and kind of goes evil over the course of it. So there are always just different things throughout these various films that I like, and it's always a mastery of seeing if someone can do something I've either never seen before, or if they do things that are kind of similar to something, kind of give it a little twist or have something that makes it unique. But in general, I think there are core overarching themes, and I hope I've conveyed them here. So thanks for listening.